do you think that we should tie tourism promotion with cinnamon and tea? Because cinnamon is almost 90% of our exports all over the world. What is your view, Sam?
Most definitely. I think much more of a holistic approach needs to be done as Sri Lanka's destination. And in terms of what those component parts are, because you mentioned cinnamon and tea, we've been taking groups to the spice gardens in Martale every year, again, pre-pandemic. And they get a lot from that. I think, being able to be told about the history or the composition of how tea is made and how cinnamon is cultivated, people actually seeing that is very interesting particularly to the UK market. I haven't seen it apart from offering free Ceylon tea on exhibition stands. That I think it makes a very interesting story as well. We take UK tourists and volunteers to the various tea factories, and they get that sort of half-day sort of tour and tasting. But I think you're right in terms of I think the Tea Promotion Board and Sri Lanka Tourism and Sri Lankan Airlines should again all work together in terms of how best we can promote it better. In terms of again, there's only one Ceylon tea. There's no other tea like that. And again, in terms of the variety, I think here in the UK, you have to really hunt to get very good Ceylon tea. You have to go to Harrods and places like that, Selfridges, to actually get 100% pure Ceylon tea. That's not sort of the fannings off the factory floor, because tea bags are much more used here. But again, a lot of people don't make the connection, that Ceylon tea comes from Sri Lanka, and the best cinnamon in the world, it comes from Sri Lanka.
Welcome to this session again, that where we are meeting in our MBA diaries, where you will get to meet an expert. So as Asia Pacific Institute of Information Technology, we are honored to be hosting this session today with another veteran in the global corporate world, especially in a time today where many discussions are held about global challenges as well as national challenges and how to overcome them. And let me also warmly welcome all our students who are joining us from Staffordshire University and the members who are joining us from our partner universities. Also all our foreign delegates and partner, diplomats who are joining us from all over the world, along with all the other distinguished guests. So to start off, let me warmly welcome Dr. Rohantha Tukorala, who is the networking pioneering a personality behind this effort of bringing this exposure to all our students, and of course a director and the head of postgraduate programs at Abbott Sri Lanka, to officially introduce our guest and continue the session from there. Dr. Hanta, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kaushali, and lovely meeting once again in the evening today. We got a professional from the UK. He's joining us from the UK. He's an expert on tourism, 30 years of global experience specializing in events marketing, business development, and his expertise is focusing on practical strategies, training, and sharing of knowledge. Holds an MBA in degree in hotel administration, membership of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, membership of the Hospitality Institute, and began his career in hotels in the UK with Forte Hotels. He has gained the reputation of developing teams at Reed Exhibitions, the Financial Times, IATA, as well as having worked at the Commonwealth Business Council. Based in London, UK, where he was brought up and educated, continued to help Sri Lanka by assisting Sri Lanka tourism, Sri Lankan Airlines, as well as having set up charities helping children through education since 2005. He's an active diaspora member of various organizations, including the Association of Professional Sri Lankans in the UK. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Goonetillaka, absolute fantastic personality that I met. I mean, from the days that I was chairman of tourism in 2015, and we have kept close to each other. And over to you, sir. Sam, over to you.
Good afternoon, good evening. I should actually say Aiboan and Vanakkam as well, just to make an apology that Sinhala isn't my first language anymore, so I will be talking in English, and I hope you can all follow my accent. So as Rohantha very kindly introduced me, I have been living in the UK for quite a considerable amount of time. And also my specialism has been in events, marketing, business development, and tourism. I've been asked to share some of my experiences, knowledge, and ideas of what can be done to strengthen tourism outflows from the UK to Sri Lanka. So I don't need to elaborate further in terms of how critical this time period is right now for Sri Lanka. And I think one of the key things to state at the very beginning is, I think Sri Lanka is very capable of meeting this challenge. It has been very resilient before in terms of, we've had the tsunami, we've had COVID, we've had civil war, all sorts of experiences that had adversely affected the country and especially tourism in the past. And the best thing of all is that, Sri Lanka being a very resilient country with very resilient people, have made sure that tourism bounces back. So in a similar vein, my thinking is that, the country is capable, but I think one of the key areas of focus is that now is the time to really implement a change that's going to be long lasting. And also, we shouldn't be afraid to make a change and make some drastic changes in how tourism is marketed and sold, particularly from the UK. So I don't need to tell you that, the UK is a traditionally big market for Sri Lanka. The UK, in actual fact, is the fifth largest economy in the world, producing 3.5% of world GDP. And according to United Nations Tourism, they have said that the UK is the fourth largest tourism spender in the world. And before the pandemic, there was around 70 million foreign trips recorded from the UK. So it's a very big market. And in actual terms for Sri Lanka, back in May 2022, the UK market accounted for 12.2%, second only to India. I think the other characteristics that we seem to sometimes forget is that, the UK market is a much higher spend compared to China and India. They have a longer stay, on average 2 to 3 weeks. And overall, UK travelers, again, pre-pandemic and pre-economic crisis, had a much higher disposable income per capita. And the area that I think Sri Lanka has possibly lost its focus on is looking at selecting key markets that are high spend, that are resilient to economic changes, and also looking at those segments in a lot of detail in terms of matching what their expectations are and what their needs are once they get to Sri Lanka, and providing the infrastructure and products and the service to match that. I think that's where, in some respects, we've been going wrong a lot of the time. I think Sri Lanka has made the mistake of pitching itself as a low-end market, mid-market, concentrating too much possibly on backpackers, and not looking at high yield markets, high spend markets, So, for example, baby boomers, you know, there's some key areas that we need to consider in terms of that segment, particularly for Sri Lanka. You know, age between 18 to 40, they're very digital savvy, they're very eco-friendly, they're very much into responsible tourism. They're also really looking at experience-led tourism and destinations. So what they can get rather than just the scenic beauty of the country. You know, looking at the research of guests that I've sent and getting their feedback, you know, their primary interests, we always ask them, what do you want to do once you get to Sri Lanka? What are your interests? You know, what's going to interest your children? You know, what do you want out of your travel to Sri Lanka? And I think what we have been missing out is really selling the USP, the unique selling point of Sri Lanka. And what we've been doing is bundling everything together, sun, sea, and sand, and you know, just regurgitating the same old itineraries time and time again. And I think that has been a mistake, and I think we need to change that in favor of looking at more activity-led sales and marketing. So looking at, you know, yoga, Ayurveda, looking at cuisines. I mean, there's a tremendous interest in Sri Lankan cuisine now in the UK. I think, you know, we've had people like Rick Stein going to Sri Lanka and doing programs and producing cookery books, and that's you know, and there's lots more restaurants now in the UK that featuring Sri Lankan cuisine. So a lot of British people are getting to know the flavors of Sri Lanka, which, you know, which are different and again unique. And I think we need to capitalize that on a bit more. And also these baby boomers and the younger market, if you like, you know, they're very much into water sports, mountain trekking, mountain climbing. You know, they want to go cycling, they want to do bird watching, whale watching, safaris, but equally, you know, they're looking for eco-friendly, responsible tourism products and destinations. They're against colonialism, they're against racism. They're looking for really unique experiences, and they travel very widely. I think, you know, in Asia, you know, they tend to go to Thailand and Bali, Malaysia, those sorts of places, and they want sort of, you know, really active, adventure-led holidays when they do travel. So I think we need to look at packaging those together specifically for that sort of market. But bearing in mind that, you know, they're looking at voluntourism, they, you know, as I said before, you know, very, very internet and digital savvy. So they're looking for a destination that has the connectivity, you know, so they can have an app, so they can get their information. You know, they don't tend to use travel agents or tour operators. They book everything directly through the internet, and they tend to stay in Airbnb properties. And you know, although they do want value for money, I think, you know, they're prepared to pay for a real unique experience. So those are the points that I want to make first of all in terms of that particular market. You know, seeing what can be done to really tailor and find some unique experiences, and how best they can get that information. Because, you know, without sounding too critical, looking at the websites and also contacting the major tour operators, there's nothing. It's all very, very generic, and I think that possibly is a mistake. I think there's lots of, you know, tours to the Cultural Triangle and Temple of the Tooth and going down south, and there's stuff about beaches and the bits about safari, but it doesn't really detail according to market segment, if you like. And I think one of the solutions of that would be to have a much more of an interactive website for Sri Lanka tourism. So the person can go into the system with a drop-down menu, put down their age, put down their interests and what they want to get, and then from that, at the back end, if it could be put together in terms of, their specific itineraries for that particular person or that particular family, with a costing, and also directed to, which tour operator or travel agent can actually manage it, and what the costing would be. So that would be much better in terms of, although having said that, I mean, there are suggested itineraries on the website, but it's not easy to navigate. And also with this particular market, they are very digital savvy. They want that information very quickly in the first 5 minutes. And I think, they're going to be put off by, spending 20 minutes trawling across the web page to find web pages to find the relevant areas that they're interested in. And also that market particularly wants, real assurances about, because they don't want to support any form of animal cruelty, including riding elephants. I mean, a lot of the people that I've sent in the last few years before the pandemic, didn't want to go to Pinno Elephant Orphanage. They didn't want to ride elephants. They didn't want to join any whale watching tours because, or go to the safari parks because they'd heard it's overcrowded and, not being run efficiently and properly. So that, and a lot of people, from the UK want to support, the local community through tourism, So I think that's another area. I mean, for example, the travel agents and even the ticketing agent that I use in the UK, all of them give a percentage of their profits to help Lanka, the charity that I run that helps children. So the money that they spend whilst in Sri Lanka, a percentage of that, from the travel agent, etc., is ploughed back again to the country. So that's sort of sustainable tourism model, if you like, on a small scale, works really well. And I think that could be another USP for Sri Lanka. I mean, ABTA did a report, so that's the Association of British Travel Agents here in the UK. 70% of people in the UK believe that travel companies should help local people. And I think also in the UK, with this backdrop of anti-colonialism, and we've had all sorts of protests here in the UK about slavery in the past. The backdrop of that, they want to, the UK population, when they do travel, they want to go to places, if they've got a historical past, colonial past, that's fine, but they want to be able to give something back to the country. And similarly, in terms of wildlife, this particular market is very interested in preserving wildlife across the world, and the BBC here in the UK have had a number of TV programs by Sir David Attenborough, such as The Blue Planet, looking at how wildlife and animals particularly, and corals and mangroves should be saved. So people are very, very, very much looking into going to destinations that support wildlife preservation, and whale and dolphin conservation as well. A few years ago, I worked with Sri Lankan Airlines, and we sent a BBC crew to Sri Lanka. I sent my brother-in-law, who's a whale expert here in the UK, and he did a film for the BBC where he swam with whales in Kalpitia and down south as well. And there was a lot of press coverage in the Daily Telegraph and a lot of international media of that particular visit. And we worked with the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society, putting together guidelines on how whale watching should be done sustainably in Sri Lanka, which I'm pleased to say is still in place today. So there's some examples, I mean, of the sorts of areas that should be highlighted. And I think one of the fantastic USPs that has been forgotten is that Sri Lanka is the only place in the world where you can see world's two largest mammals on the same day in the same place, or very near the same place. So you can see whales and elephants, who are the largest animals, the largest sea mammal and the largest land mammal, in the same day. So that's a fantastic USP that nobody else has got. And I think also one of the limitations, if you like, for Sri Lanka has been that we sometimes think that we're probably better than other destinations, particularly our neighbours, and we forget how they have been branding and marketing themselves and selling themselves as a destination. So for example, Malaysia and India, Singapore, Thailand, all have had very strong branding and marketing campaigns, and especially the Maldives as well. I think we've missed a trick. I think in some ways that we haven't done much more in terms of dual destination marketing with the Maldives. I think that's an area that we could look at significantly. Also, I think part of the problem is in terms of making sure that there's good communication, so that if there is an inquiry or if there's a question, in the UK, that it's directed and it's answered properly, and there's a certain level of service given by tourism officials, and also some of the information I don't think is disseminated well enough. I recall all the problems that with COVID in Sri Lanka, and all the different mixed messages and quite a lot of confusion in terms of what paperwork you needed, what vaccine certificates you needed, and what all the regulations were. It was all over the place. So I think we need to work harder at that in terms of making sure the communication is right, it's disseminated properly, the inquiries are handled well, and people understand the whole dimension of the tourism product and service offering for Sri Lanka. I think we tend to sort of have a mass marketing, all sizes fit all type policy, which I don't think is going to be adequate anymore. I think we're going to look very carefully at market segmentation, and looking at research as well. I think we've been far too gung-ho about and worried about statistics. So all this business about arrival figures, I think is very misleading. The first of all to point out is that when they give the arrival figures from the UK, some of those arrival figures include people like myself, born in Sri Lanka, but have lived here, is now a British citizen, and in order for me to travel to Sri Lanka, I have to get a tourist visa. So when I go, I don't necessarily stay in hotels, and I don't necessarily go to restaurants. I stay in our house in Colombo. So there's so many people like that, who live in the UK, who are Sri Lankan descent, have a British passport, or maybe dual national, and they, it's VFR, so visiting friends and relatives market, but they're counted as tourists. So I think that's misleading, because it's not just the numbers that we need to look at, it's the yield from those numbers, and in terms of the spend and the buyer behavior whilst they're there. I think that needs to be analysed. And I think I've approached Sri Lankan tourism about this several occasions, in terms of we have to have research-based marketing strategies. It can't be just what we think. It has to be based on some sort of research. We need to question the UK market, particularly in terms of what do they do once they get to Sri Lanka? What do they look for in the information hunt for booking a holiday? And also giving them some detailed questionnaires in terms of did they achieve their expectations? Did they enjoy their holiday? What things should be improved, maybe? So that sort of in-depth research and analysis really needs to happen before you do any brand marketing, before you do any fan trips, anything. I think the first thing that should be done is look at some detailed research. And I think, you know, one of the suggestions that I've had, and I'll come to some of the suggestions later on, but one of the key ones was if we can commission, or Sri Lankan Tourism Commission, students, maybe at your place of learning, to actually do a proper in-depth analysis of, you know, past visitors, current visitors, in terms of you know, market segmentation, buyer behavior, you know, yield figures, you know, detailed segmentation analysis. I think that needs to be done by market, you know, and also not just by country of origin, but also markets within that country of origin. So, you know, I've talked about baby boomers. I mean, it's interesting for the UK market. Some research has been done to say that the over 65 markets probably have the most disposable income. But obviously the problem with that is, you know, some of the areas of concern for over 65s and indeed families as well is safety and security whilst they're in Sri Lanka. I think, you know, the international media and even the local media have sort of portrayed Sri Lanka right now as a very, you know, unsafe destination. You know, there could be protests and riots at any moment. It's unstable government, political instability, economic collapse, you know, long queues, no petrol, power cuts. You know, the list is on and on and on, which all spells doom and disaster for tourism, particularly from the UK, because it's only just recently that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office removed their advice not to travel to Sri Lanka. But having said that, I mean, I checked the website this morning. It says, you know, you can travel to Sri Lanka, it's not a problem, but be aware, you know, of fuel rationing, no medicines, lack of imported food items, and, you know, general scarcity of food for the local people. It's all written in there, and also to avoid Colombo Fort and Galle Face because there's ongoing protests there. So those sorts of things. I mean, you know, obviously I understand that, you know, there is a right for people to protest and make their voices heard. It is a democratic country after all, but you know, people need to also think about, you know, longer term how damaging this sort of activity is for the country, particularly now where there are no dollars, and you know, despite government promises of, you know, fuel being available to, you know, registered transport providers in Sri Lanka, I think, you know, in reality, judging by feedback from people who are on the ground in Sri Lanka, sometimes that doesn't happen. So that, you know, so those sorts of things coming back to the UK, you know, travellers' tales that are quite negative, not through their own fault and not through the fault of the country. It's just how the situation is right now. You know, I think the plans really should be for the winter season, and we should be looking at, you know, hopefully being optimistic that, you know, the fuel will arrive, whether or not the IMF bails them out at the end of July or whatever the time period is. I think, you know, we can't just depend on bailouts anymore. I think, you know, we have to look at getting the country back into some sort of order, improve the infrastructure, and then start aggressively selling and marketing the destination again. That's probably easier said than done from the UK point of view, because you know, the FCO have already created quite a lot of damage in terms of, you know, warning people that, you know, Sri Lanka is not 100% safe anymore. And I think also, you know, I looked at feedback from and suggestions from some of the travellers that I've sent, and they've said that, you know, the fear of safety, and also the whole business of being harassed, and sometimes, you know, being fleeced by touts and that, those sorts of people in Sri Lanka, particularly on the beaches, etc., has been a an area of concern for them. Also, just general small things, the lack of tourism infrastructure. I mean, simple things like they complain about there's inadequate toilet facilities when they're traveling around in Sri Lanka, and now of course people are complaining about power cuts and no alcohol available and no fuel. But even before then, I think there was a general feeling of particularly if you're an unaccompanied female in Sri Lanka, that that you are likely to be harassed, and there have been incidents, and it's been reported in the media. So those sorts of areas, I think, has been a cause of concern in the past. Also, things like I found myself when I've been to Sri Lanka several times that there's a distinct lack of consistency in terms of service. So what you expect and what you expect and then what is finally delivered once you arrive at your hotel or resort is a different matter. And also this whole business about not having enough professional staff to run hotels and resorts in Sri Lanka is another problem. I think with the current situation as well, and with so many young people now going abroad, that problem is going to continue. I think it is quite a bleak future for young people unless something really radically changes. So I think another aspect. I mean, I've read in social media a few stories about local people not valuing the importance of tourism to Sri Lanka, and expecting people, visitors from the UK, particularly white British tourists, or you come from a very rich country, so we're going to get as much money out of you as possible, isn't the right sort of attitude. And also this industry needs to be professionalized, I think, and also I think one of the key areas that I've noticed over the years is how much political interference there is in tourism, and and I don't think a lot of that has had any benefit. I think there's been over 10 or 12 chairmen of tourism in the last few years. I think heads of tourism really should be appointed on merit and their professional background. For the UK market, I mean, their preferred travel dates usually July and August in the school holidays, but of course because of the monsoon at that particular time, I think we should do some much more aggressive marketing on the East Coast, who don't experience the rainy season at that particular time. So I think for the UK market, I think we should be really honest with people in terms of when is the best time to go in Sri Lanka. I mean, over the years I've noticed how much that has changed anyway. So I think in the old days, sun was guaranteed when you went to Sri Lanka, but I think that's because of global warming and everything else, that's changed quite significantly. So we need to sort of be wary of that in terms of being able to provide other things than going to the beach between July and August on the West Coast, for example, and switch destinations if the beach thing is really the most important thing for that particular market. But then going back to what Sri Lanka needs to do for the UK market, I think first of all is to have much more of a longer term plan of how to attract high spending travelers who are not necessarily price led, because the UK at the moment, just like the rest of the world, is also hit with high inflation, high fuel prices, because of the Ukraine war. Apart from oil and gas prices going up, you know, we have a scarcity of wheat, we have a scarcity of sunflower oil, for example. You know, everything has got, you know, food prices here have also gone up. So I think, you know, you need to be mindful of the fact that the whole world, I wouldn't say is going through a recession, but, you know, could well be going through a recession shortly. But they're also facing the same issues as Sri Lanka and everywhere else, in terms of, you know, the high price of fuel, which has an impact on you know, airline travel, and, you know, prices generally, and also the fact that you know, the connectivity of Sri Lanka as well, you know, had been improved in terms of, you know, more airlines flying to Sri Lanka, but then the prices have escalated so high that a lot of the UK market are thinking, well, you know, for that money I can, you know, go to Tunisia or Turkey instead. So I think, you know, what we need to do is to, you know, not just talk about value for money, but to say, you know, in terms of, you know, what the real benefits are, and, you know, highlight the uniqueness of the destination and the fact that it has such a lot of variety. You know, if you compare it to any other country in the world, and I've traveled extensively around the world myself, you know, I have yet to find a destination that, you know, has such variety, has such uniqueness, has such wonderful hospitality in the main, and also, you know, you can pick and choose, you know, what you do once you get there. So I think that needs to be packaged really well in terms of, you know, not running down our competitors and, you know, comparing ourselves to Bali or Thailand. I think that's not the way to do it, but to really show ourselves in terms of standing out, and we are highlighted in terms of, you know, the fact of the destination being so multifaceted, and also in one small place. And you know, in the last few years, you know, road connectivity has been much better. So there's so I think that has been vastly improved. And, you know, the level of hotel accommodation in Sri Lanka has improved in recent years as well, which is great. But I think the main thing should be, you know, is turning away a little bit from the backpack market and the lower end and even the mid-end market that traditionally has been going from the UK. You know, people are looking for cheap holidays and cheap getaways. I don't think Sri Lanka is a cheap destination anymore. And I think we should be looking at the high level end of the market, the exclusive end of the market, who are not price sensitive, but really look at that market in terms of, you know, what they're looking at and what things turn them on and turn them off. I mean, they're very much into responsible tourism, for example. They want something very unique. They don't want something of you know, menu-driven tourism. They want something bespoke, just unique to themselves or their family, and they want, you know, good IT connectivity because they're very much app-driven. So one of the suggestions that I've had, and I can't see any progress from Sri Lanka tourism point of view, is actually, you know, why can't an app be developed on someone's mobile phone, which they can use, you know, obviously to book their flight, book their accommodation, and even be able to pay in their currency, so in pounds sterling, pay for all this, get all the information that they need from an app. And they also want to see reviews as well, you know, good reviews. And testimonials. I think, you know, that's another area that Sri Lanka should concentrate on. I saw recently that the Sri Lankan cricketers, the Australian cricketers at Sri Lanka, and some of them gave some in-depth testimonials on camera about how safe Sri Lanka was. So that sort of stuff needs to be re-leveraged, onto the Sri Lanka website and onto social media platforms and really marketed, because there's nothing better than a testimonial from somebody who's actually been there, who's experienced Sri Lanka for themselves. It's no good, you and I talking about it. They need to know from people who've been there what their experience has been. And we shouldn't be afraid of looking at some of the bad stuff as well, and being in a position of being able to put that right. So I think if we can improve the service level in terms of inquiries and information, and focus more on being more proactive than reactive. I think as a country, we not seem to be planning for the future and having a plan B or a plan C. It's just a lot of it is reactive marketing, reactive strategies to an issue or a problem or or COVID. I think going forward it should be what is the long-term strategy, and should something happen, what are we going to do as a country to mitigate some of those situations. Another thing as well, I think we don't do enough in terms of engaging the Sri Lankan diaspora across the world, and particularly in the UK. I think one of the good ways of going forward would be to appoint some Sri Lankan tourism ambassadors in the UK, and incentivize them to maybe have accompanied trips to Sri Lanka, like family trips with groups, and to really talk about how wonderful their home of Sri Lanka is. I think the added benefit of that is that I've been on quite a few escorted tours myself from the UK. So and the feedback is that it's much more of a wonderful trip, because obviously we still use a tour operator and a transport provider, but somebody who is Sri Lankan who goes with them on the tour and explains about the history and the places, and really helps them in terms of doing something very unique and bespoke for them is a wonderful thing. So I think we need to do more of that, and also capitalizing on the benefits and USPs of Sri Lanka. I think we don't do that enough. I've been to lots of and organized as well as attending trade exhibitions all around the world, and what I see much more of is some of the countries that really do well at trade exhibitions, for example, is who really aggressively sell their destination, and also look at the USPs of their destination, and also try and what's the word, sort of enable the experience to come alive, because a lot of these markets from the UK, they want an experience, and they want to. So if you're selling and marketing that at a trade exhibition, one of the best ways of doing that is to. I remember going to ITB in Berlin. I think Dr. Arhanta was there as well when he was the chairman, and they had somebody from I think it was Siddha Lepa doing Ayurvedic massage on the stand, and it was a real draw, because not only was it was an interactive experience, but the person who was doing it on the stand was actually whilst the person was having their massage was selling them the destination of Sri Lanka. Similarly at World Travel Market in the UK, we did a few exhibitions where we had promoting Sri Lankan weddings. So we had a bride and groom in Kandyan wedding outfits, getting onto a porua, and then we had the drummers and the Kandyan dancers there. So demonstrating the vitality of Sri Lanka and some sort of uniqueness is a great way forward. I can remember years ago they had somebody coming onto the exhibition stand, who was a mask maker. So from a piece of wood, making a mask so those sorts of things, I think a lot of the exhibitions we give visitors Ceylon tea, for example. Um, um, so, really enlivening the experience in the selling efforts would be another way forward. And I think also because our markets are much more digital savvy, I think we should be very selective in terms of which trade exhibitions that are attended in person in the future. Notwithstanding the fact that the payment of these is in dollars, and secondly, some of the very big trade exhibitions are extremely expensive, so you don't want to spend more than 70% of your total marketing budget on a few exhibitions. I think also there should be a much better exhibition strategy with some KPIs in terms of how many people were seen, what business was made, what the cost benefit analysis should be done, particularly for each exhibition. I mean, when I was a group sales director for Reed Travel Exhibitions, that's one of the things that we did was we went to every single tourism board stand and said, how are you measuring the value of this trade exhibition? What are you doing in terms of measurement? What are you doing in terms of analysis post-event? So I'm not sure that's been done by Sri Lanka. And I think, people have been questioning, in-person events, and particularly during the pandemic when there weren't any in-person events. A lot of the promotion was done online. So I think analysis needs to be done in terms of, what's the best way forward, what changes could be made, and how best can these markets be serviced in terms of giving them information, and enlivening the experience, and making the marketing spend spread further, and also capitalizing in terms of some of the research and the feedback that you get, using that for decision making. So I think that would be some of the key points. And also, I think there's been some talk of Sri Lankan Airlines and Sri Lankan tourism, sort of fusing together, if you like, in terms of within the UK. So there's one point of contact, and that we're working together. I think they've been working separately in silos for so long. I mean, even for our trade exhibition, there's 2 stands, which I always think it's a complete waste of money having from the same country. Why don't you just have 1 stand? That's the first thing. But also in terms of using the national airline as part of the marketing effort for Sri Lanka tourism. I mean, they should be doing that from every single day. So I think they're missing a trick there. If you pull those resources together, you're promoting the airline as well as the destination in one hit. So maybe sharing some of the expenditure of promotion as well in the future might be a good way around it. I think again, a lot of these decisions haven't been made because of politics. So I think we have to change the mindset in terms of oh, it's been done like that for so long. Why change it? Isn't the way forward. Right now, the country needs to be brave to make some very, very firm decisions and changes, and we shouldn't be afraid to embrace those changes. And if it's a mistake, we learn from it. If not, we gain from the experience. So I think those are some of the key areas. I think if we can, in terms of reducing bureaucracy, I get so many complaints or observances, from people in Sri Lanka as well as people here in the UK, of how bureaucratic and slow-moving decisions regarding tourism or practically anything in Sri Lanka, to do business there, to get a form done or get something official done, is so onerous and so what's the word? Heartbreaking almost. That it's such a frustrating experience. It doesn't need to be that way. Phone calls should be answered, email should be answered. You know, and even if you haven't got the answer at the particular time, just acknowledge the fact that you got that. You know, thank you for your email. Let me come back to you in a few days' time. And we don't seem to have that etiquette in Sri Lanka, and I think that puts a lot of people off in terms of, you know, going forward. And I think that needs to change. You know, we need to be better at communication, be accessible, be more transparent, and really, you know, be honest as well. You know, if there is a problem, then we should actually say, so that can't be done right now, for whatever reason, rather than giving somebody false hope. You know, everything's fine. I mean, I read stuff all the time, so, you know, saying, "Oh, tourists aren't affected. You come to Sri Lanka, that's not a problem." And then when you actually go there and see what's happening, you know, it isn't. That just simply isn't true. Also, you know, a lot of our guests are saying, you know, that they've deferred going this year simply because they, you know, can't bear to see, you know, the local people suffering so much. So, you know, that's you know, people particularly from the UK, you know, who are very close to Sri Lanka, and, you know, they love the destination, they love their people. You know, people who have been before, you know, are really heartbroken about, you know, the situation the country is in right now. So, you know, although they understand that, you know, going there as a tourist is going to help in terms of providing revenue and dollars for the country, equally, you know, if we promise to give them a normal, uninterrupted stay, and then don't deliver, then you have another major problem, because that will come back to the UK, and people will say, you know, there is a problem, you can't get this, that, and the other, and so, you know, can't move freely around the country. I mean, right now in the UK, talking about moving around, I mean, we've Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday of this week is a national rail strike, you know, and it's impossible to, you know, in terms of transport connectivity. But the thing about it is, you know, the government, you know, told everyone in good time, gave them the information, told them what was happening, told them what the alternatives are, and also said, you know, if you can work from home on those 2 or 3 days. So you know, although people are still angry about it, it wasn't such a big issue in terms of, you know, people's attitude towards, you know, travel generally. This is, I'm talking about in the UK, and this is the whole of the UK, and it's the first big major strike in 30 or 40 years. So it is a big issue here. So similarly, you know, if something like that happens in Sri Lanka, the point I'm making is that, you know, if the information and the thing is the situation is looked at in terms of, you know, from an honest point of view, and the information is given out, then it's so much better. I think, you know, what the problem has been, you know, there's so much innuendo, so much rumor, things that circulate around, which causes, you know, misinformation, distrust, and you know, an unrest. And all these things, you know, whether we like it or not, does affect tourism. People coming from the UK aren't going to go, you know, into a potential war zone or face uncertainty. If they're going to hospital, they may not have medicine if they're unwell. So, you know, it's a really difficult one right now for the UK, and you know, I don't know whether, unless Sri Lanka really, you know, makes some significant change, decide on being much more aggressive in terms of setting a marketing destination, and also can assure travellers in the future that the infrastructure and the security and stability is going to be much better, you know, in time for the winter season. You know, that's the only way forward. I mean, I can't see any other way around it. I mean, there has to be stability first of all, and we should try and avoid price discounting and look at adding value for the future, looking at these markets much more significantly and carefully than before. And I think it would be quite a good idea if we can commission students to actually do some detailed research and data analysis in terms of, market segmentation and behavior by market and by destination. Look at yields, look at buyer behavior, what's there in Sri Lanka, and give that to Sri Lankan tourism SLTDA and the tourism board and the chairman as well, and base decisions for the future on that. So those are my areas of and thoughts. Rohan, I don't know whether you want to ask any questions or.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you very much. And to be very honest, it's one of the most productive meetings I have had. Very candid, very straightforward. And I sincerely thank you for the very honest feedback you gave. People tend to color the feedback that comes. People want to see good. They like to feel that they are not part of the problem. But very few people have the courage to say what you said. And I sincerely thank you. I think it's one of the most productive meetings that we have had, and which is exactly what we need to have. Sam, thank you so much. Really appreciate.
Pleasure.
Getting hold heaps of questions. I'm having, oh my God. I can't tell you how many questions I have got. First question coming up. It says, do you think it's prudent for us to market Sri Lanka today in the UK in the current reality? Your honest feedback, please. It's coming from a lady called Dinity, who is on the Staffordshire MBA program in the final year. She works for a BPO company in Sri Lanka. Over to you, Sam.
I remember when the Gulf crisis hit the UK. I was working for Forte Hotels at the time, and that was a big crisis then in terms of people not staying in hotels, not traveling because of the Gulf crisis and the war in Iraq or Kuwait or wherever it was at that particular time. And I think some of the organizations at that time faced the same sort of question: is it prudent to continue with hotel promotion, destination promotion when there's a war going on and travel was impeded, etc., etc. And the answer to that is that I think if there is something like that happens, whatever the situation in the country, you can't just turn off tourism destination, like a tap on and off when it suits. You have to have some sort of continual presence regardless of the crisis. And in effect, if Sri Lanka had a consistent brand and a strategy, that could be communicated. But I think in the short answer to the question is, at first glance, when a country is going through a crisis like this and the safety infrastructure can't be guaranteed, I don't think you can do lavish marketing spend because what are you selling? And you can't 100% guarantee safety and security of travelers once they get there. So it would be dangerous to do anything like a global campaign as such. But having said that, I think in terms of a campaign of reassurance, in terms of taking the time to recoup, getting people together and working unity. I think that's another area that I didn't sort of talk about in great detail because it sounds very negative. But I think the industry and all the stakeholders, particularly the private sector, needs to be much better united in terms of their effort. Without all these personal agendas, infighting, and almost sort of like coup type of behavior. That all has to stop, and everyone needs to get behind the brand, behind the product, and really live and breathe it in terms of because if we're not excited or if we're not enamored about it, how can we expect to promote it? We need to have some confidence and trust that this is almost like a blip, without sounding too glib about it. There's some things we can control and some things we can't control. We can't control the political system. We can't, suddenly have a ejection button for the president to leave. We've got to put that to one side and look at how we can, build confidence, build security, build some sort of plan in terms of, marketing the USPs. So, the answer is it's not prudent to do a marketing global campaign right now, but it is prudent to have a safety buffer type of marketing in terms of assurances and saying, yes, we're still here. This is what we can do. These could be some of the constraints, but Sri Lanka is still open.
Good question coming up, Sam. And the question is, we hear about full range of products, like you very rightly mentioned, that we can market. Could you tell us from over there, what do you think is the most top 3 attractive products that we should market from Sri Lanka? The question is coming from Gayan. He works for a top apparel company in Sri Lanka. He's on his first year of his MBA program.
Mm-hmm. I think because the buzzwords from the UK are sustainability, reducing carbon footprint, getting back to nature, that wellness. So some of the nature and wellness products of Sri Lanka, which I think are often put on a back burner, if you like, are very much in vogue right now for different markets in the UK, particularly as I mentioned, the baby boomers and the younger market, and also, funnily enough, the over 65 market as well, who are very much into health. I think the problem is being sometimes, we chase a market in Sri Lanka and we don't seem to match it by the infrastructure and the service that's required. So it's one of the things that I noticed when I was running Arabian travel market in Dubai. And Sri Lanka was very busy trying to woo the Middle East market to Sri Lanka, forgetting that market is quite difficult and we didn't have all the infrastructure. And this was also the backdrop of when there were riots going on in Bentota and there was an anti-Muslim feeling, etc. So in the backdrop of that was happening. But we forgot that some of these markets, particularly the Middle East market, they're not going to be sunbathing and going to the seaside. What they want and what we can provide once they're in Sri Lanka are sometimes two different things. So that's the first thing. So in terms of, if the adventure and the thrill seekers market, which is there from the UK in droves, can be managed much better and promoted much better as a distinct segment, that would be the way forward. But also there has to be this whole area of being eco-friendly, being very much into preserving wildlife and so not destroy it, because that those are very key concerns. So I think the wellness, so Ayurveda, maybe whale watching as well, some of the mountain climbing, paragliding, those sort of areas, I think is a growth area. But again, we need to make sure that the suppliers of that are doing it to international standards, and they're also very, very wary of making sure that everything's done as naturally as possible, and there's no damage to the biodiversity of the country.
Um, uh, the question is from Shirani on the tourism MBA program of Colombo University, and she's asking, thank you for the very realistic thinking that you gave, very straightforward, appreciate sincerely. This is the kind of discussion that we need to have if you really want to improve. My question to you is, why you mentioned Sigiriya in as one of the most important thing we should market, because we say it's the eighth wonder of the world.
Mhm.
Interesting question.
I mean, I've been to Sigiriya countless occasions. You know, as a child, and then I visited there on my honeymoon, and then I also took all my 4 children there one by one. I've taken so many groups there, and it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful destination, and it's a wonderful thing. But I think one of the key areas is that you know, if it's not organized properly, it's an issue. Touts are a big issue once you get to Sigiriya, and also I think a lot of the guides that I even use don't really know the full extent of the history of Sigiriya, which I've always found disappointing. And you know, although it's UNESCO protected and it's a 8th wonder of the world, that sort of stuff, I personally think that, you know, it could be marketed a lot better. I think it's just added on sometimes, you know, with the cultural triangle thing, you know, Dumbledore as well. And I think locally as well, because it's such a trek to get to as well, in terms of, you know, the distance traveled by road, and also the climb as well. I think one of the things that I did to enhance the whole Sigiriya experience is that we did the Sigiriya village experience, which a lot of the people from the UK loved. Although it's a little bit manufactured to my taste, it is still very good in terms of, you know, going on a bullock cart ride, and then the Orua thing, and then, you know, making a roti in the house and all that sort of stuff. So if it can be packaged together like that, then I think it's definitely a. But looking at some of these markets, you know, they're, especially the adventure thrill seekers, apart from the climbing of the Sigiriya, they're not that turned on by our historical sites, you know, like Polonnaruwa and Radhapura and these sorts of places. I remember my children, you know, even in their teens, would complain about, you know, having to go to so many temples. You know, in a lot of the Western people's eyes, you know, the temples are all the same. We know they're not, and we, you know, appreciate this, the history behind the country. And I think, you know, I think we need to provide much more information in terms of, you know, the benefits of visiting Sigiriya, particularly, because it is a wonderful, unique attraction. You know, there's nowhere else like that, to my mind. So, you know, forgive me if I didn't promote it a bit more, but yes, it should be on most people's itineraries.
Very interesting question coming from Hansani on the MBA program. Do you think that we should tie tourism promotion with cinnamon and tea? Because cinnamon is almost 90% of our exports all over the world comes from Sri Lanka, while tea, of course, is I think synonymous with regard to Ceylon tea, because we have seen Ceylon tea being promoted in all the top retail outlets like the Selfridges world. So, what is your view, Sam?
Most definitely. I think much more of a holistic approach needs to be done as Sri Lanka's destination, and in terms of what those component parts are, because you mentioned cinnamon and tea. You know, we've been taking groups to the spice gardens in Martale every year, again, pre-pandemic, and they get a lot from that. I think, you know, being able to be told about, you know, the history or the composition of or how tea is made and how cinnamon is cultivated, people actually seeing that, is very interesting to particularly to the UK market. I haven't seen it, apart from offering free Ceylon tea on exhibition stands and most events in the UK. I think there should be much more tea tasting, the history of the tea industry, which obviously, as we all know, was started by the Brits anyway. That I think it makes a very interesting story as well. We take UK tourists and volunteers to the various tea factories, and they get that sort of half day sort of tour and tasting. But I think you're right in terms of I think the Tea Promotion Board and Sri Lanka Tourism and Sri Lankan Airlines should again all work together in terms of how best we can promote it better in terms of again, there's only one Ceylon tea. There's no other tea like that, and again, in terms of the variety, I think here in the UK, you have to really hunt to get very good Ceylon tea. You have to go to Harrods and places like that, Selfridges, to actually get 100% pure Ceylon tea that's not sort of the fannings off the factory floor, because tea bags are much more used here. But again, a lot of people don't make the connection, that Ceylon tea comes from Sri Lanka, and the best cinnamon in the world, it comes from Sri Lanka. They don't make that connection, because I think we've been very sort of reticent about boasting about our wonderful products. It's sort of put into the conversation or put into the marketing piece at the end. It should be the other way around. Again, it's a USP that we should be boasting about and promoting much more aggressively.
Thank you, Sam. You have been 1 hour 15 minutes with us. I only booked you for an hour, but I'm sorry, I have to ask you one more question.
Sure.
It's actually coming from an IT student from the University of Staffordshire, studying at Abbott. Lovely guy. He's an award-winning guy, a guy called Shamira. He's saying how important is digital marketing and social media when it comes to promoting tourism in the UK.
Hugely important. As I said before, I think Sri Lanka tourism has been, don't use the word bad, has been lacking in a much more cohesive digital marketing strategy. There's a guy called Chaminda Munasinghe who has been doing a fabulous job over these years with the limited resources and et cetera. There's a long way to go, and we can't rest it all on one person's door at all, not by any means. But I think one of the things that's been happening is over the years, in the last nearly 20 years that I've been associated with Sri Lanka tourism, is there's real reluctance for change. People still want to do brochures and mass marketing and mailings and advertising, print stuff, exhibitions, those sorts of things, which are sort of old school, if you like. And now in the 21st century, and with people, particularly in the UK, being much more digital savvy, and everything is an app, everything's iPhone led, everything's internet driven. People have forgotten even how to write now. Everything is on the laptop. So it is hugely important, and I think we need to invest as a country in Sri Lanka in terms of having having some better digital resource marketing, people who have been trained, who have some experience in terms of promoting digitally, who understand the benefits of that. And the new minister, I think he was digital technology minister in a previous life, So he will have some understanding, hopefully, of how important it is, because it is the best means of communication. And it's also not static. You know, it's much more flexible. It's much more in your face. It's immediate. You know, it can be interactive. It can be much more responsive. And you can collect data from it as well. I think, you know, here in the UK, you know, even the posters now have the QR codes, and everything is tracked. So all information is captured, and you can use your mobile phone to pay for things. You can, you know, people use it to get you know, to pay for their travel. So yeah, it is hugely important. And you know, and to start with, I mean, we need to have a complete revamp of the website. It is not interactive enough. It is, you know, it's all over the place. And you know, in terms of search optimization as well. If you actually travel, if you type in Sri Lanka travel or Sri Lanka tourism, Sri Lanka Tourism Board doesn't come up as number one. There's about 4 or 5 other ones that come up. So that's the first thing, you know. So the answer to the question is hugely important, and we have a long way to go.
Sam, I have to give this person the chance to ask one question. I'm sorry. I assure you it's the last question.
Okay.
The very interesting question, very bright guy, a guy called Manoj. He runs a government company, his dad's company, he runs it. He says, I mean, you're a professional tourism expert, and you didn't talk about theory, but you also went to the grassroots level of how people need to answer a phone in the second ring. Appreciate people of your caliber. I wish you can come to Sri Lanka and serve Sri Lanka, because we need professionals like you. My question to you is, can you tell me, in your view, who is the country who does the best destination out there in the UK?
That's a really hard question. I think here in the UK, historically, it has been Virgin, because again, very digital savvy. They're very much into this vibrancy. They're very much into a very concise message. All the information's in one place. They have some excellent call centers. So, you know, there used to be a rumor in the old days that if the telephone rang more than twice, somebody would be fired, which is a bit hard. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Richard Branson on 2 occasions. I'm not saying I know him personally, but I have met with him and interacted with him. And what I liked about his vision, and also the way he does business, I mean, he never comes to a conference or a business meeting in a shirt and tie or jacket. It's always either a jumper or just a open neck shirt. So that sort of attitude is very different, number one. And secondly, the reason why they have been so successful is because they are not so much, I mean, they are customer focused, but they are employee focused and empowered, which is something that I haven't really seen in Sri Lanka. You know, if you empower, train, and motivate your employees to be excited and be passionate about your product or service or your company, that's it. It's far better to empower them, train them, and motivate them, because they will actually provide the customer satisfaction and the sales that need to be generated. So in my mind, they're the ones who I think, in terms of what they're doing in the UK, really stand out, because they have the right attitude. They live and breathe passion, and they have a real excellent service commitment in terms of, I mean, even if you look at the, you know, complaints or suggestions, it's very few. There's very little to complain about when you when you take a Virgin flight or a Virgin train or you buy a Virgin holiday, because the customer service is always there and it's consistent. The people are excited and passionate about selling and promoting their products, and they have a wonderful etiquette in terms of the customers are valued. Every inquiry is a potential sale, and I think that's something that we miss out. When the telephone rings and somebody is inquiring about Sri Lanka, we need to empower the person who's taking that call to first of all have all the knowledge and be able to turn that inquiry into a sale. That's what's not happening. I mean, I see it time and time again when I go to trade exhibitions, that they try and get people onto the stand, and they don't know how to convert that sale or to impart the knowledge. A lot of times I've seen, particularly on the Sri Lanka stand, is that the people who are on the stand behave very unprofessionally. They're eating and drinking. They say the fateful words on an exhibition stand, "Can I help you?" Which is the worst thing that you can say to somebody that comes onto an exhibition stand. It should be, "Can I tell you about," or "Can I tell you why Sri Lanka is so different, or why you must book a holiday there?" That should be the opening gambit. So these are the types of things. I think a lot of companies around the world, and even including the UK, don't train their staff in how to be ambassadors for their product and service. And I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you very much, Sam. Brilliant discussion. I mean, I got calls from all over the world when they heard that you were coming on Tune. I told you, about it.
Yes.
So thank you. It's great. I'm happy I've hosted your invite on all the tourism websites and what in Sri Lanka. I think you'll see it on your phone as soon as our meeting is over. Ruth, over to you, please.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, go ahead, Ruth.
Wonderful. It was such a lovely discussion, lots of knowledge shared. Amazing.
Thank you.
So as we come to a close of yet another insightful diary session, I must thank our guest speaker, Mr. Sam Goonetillaka. You have been amazing and wonderful in sharing with us your knowledge in the industry, your experiences over the years. That cannot be bought easily or read in a book. So we are truly thankful for that. And also, you've not just stopped there, you've gone a step further and you've shared with us little tips on things that we can actually do in these unprecedented times to just uplift the tourism industry in Sri Lanka. So that is just a very humbling feeling as a person in the audience as well. So as always, thank you so much to our guest speaker. Thank you to the technical team at Apid for supporting us throughout this session. And last but not least, to our audience, our students, our alumni, our partners, industry partners, our well-wishers in Sri Lanka and across the world. Thank you for joining in to this amazing and wonderful session on tourism, how to build tourism in Sri Lanka. So a lovely day, a good day to you all, a lovely evening, and a good night to one and all.
Thank you.
Signing out then.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Sam.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
God bless. Bye.
Yes.